Welcome to another deep dive. We're looking at Transfigured Sea this time.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, by Sally Ann Hunter.
Okay.
And, when I first saw that Hunter was a biologist and indeed a former environmental policy officer and also a poet,
Wow.
it's like, whoa, this book is going to offer a really unique perspective on the ocean.
I bet.
And, you asked for an exploration of how Hunter uses the ocean and its creatures as metaphors for human relationships and self-discovery. So
That's a good word.
yeah, let's dive in.
Let's do it.
So the book opens with Laura, who's the sea sprite's mother, walking along the beach.
Okay.
And she's collecting shells, watching those tiny sandhoppers that bounce around like popcorn, and observing the ghost crabs, scuttling back into their burrows.
Yeah.
And it's all so vivid, but I can't help but feel like there's more to it than just beautiful description.
Oh, for sure. Hunter's really laying the groundwork for some deeper meaning here. Right from the start, she begins drawing these subtle parallels between nature
Yeah.
and human behavior.
Yeah, exactly.
Like those ghost crabs, for instance. They're super skittish. They only come out of their burrows at night.
Oh, yeah.
And it makes me think about how the sea sprite is described as this waif-like figure, always observing from a distance.
Yeah.
Almost afraid to be seen.
Right. Yeah.
Makes you wonder if her avoidance, comes from a lack of trust or maybe even like some past trauma.
Oh, that's a really interesting point. I was initially thinking of those crabs as just like representing the sea sprite's quiet nature,
Yeah.
her quiet, observant nature.
Right.
But thinking about it in terms of like trust and potential past hurt really adds a whole new layer
Absolutely.
of complexity to her character.
Yeah.
So what about those sea turtles?
Oh, yeah. Good one.
Burying their eggs on the beach.
Yeah.
It always just strikes me as such a vulnerable act.
Oh, absolutely.
Trusting the sand to keep their offspring safe.
It's a beautiful metaphor, I think.
Yeah.
For the kind of trust and vulnerability that Laura yearns for in her relationships, especially after, what we learned about her past.
Okay, so speaking of Laura's past,
Yeah.
the beach scene kind of shifts dramatically.
It does.
And she comes across these like jagged rocks and crashing waves, and it creates this feeling of unease, almost violence,
Right. And that shift in the natural world, it perfectly mirrors the shift in Laura's emotional state because it triggers a flashback to this like deeply traumatic experience that she had with her own mother. And it's a moment that totally shaped her view of motherhood and her own identity.
For our listeners who haven't read the book yet, can you give us a little context for this flashback?
Oh, yeah, for sure. So basically, the flashback reveals this like stark contrast between Laura's passion for poetry and her mother's super strict religious beliefs.
Okay.
And to her mother, poetry was dangerous and improper, maybe even like sinful. And poetry, it encourages us to like explore our emotions and it challenges, rigid worldviews.
Right.
Which directly clashed with the environment Laura was raised in.
Yeah. And this clash ultimately culminates in this terrifying incident with a carving knife.
Yes.
Where Laura's mother completely loses it when she discovers Laura's poetry partner at their house. And it just really showcases, her controlling nature.
Absolutely. And notice how the harshness of the rocks and the waves pounding on the shore, they mirror the harshness of that memory.
Yeah.
Hunter's using this visual imagery to really hammer home the impact of that experience on Laura.
And I think, most of us, maybe not to such an extreme, but we've all had those experiences that kind of changed our perspectives on a relationship, right?
Yeah.
Like those moments that stick with you and how you approach future connections.
Oh, for sure.
And it makes me wonder how, this experience, coupled with her longing for trust and vulnerability, is going to affect her relationship with the sea sprite as the story goes on.
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
That's exactly what Hunter wants us to think about.
Yeah.
Laura carries this conflict with her throughout the novel, and she obviously loves the sea sprite.
Yeah.
But there's always this fear of repeating her own mother's mistakes.
Right.
And becoming that controlling figure that she wants to avoid.
The ocean setting really lays the groundwork for all this emotional complexity, huh?
Oh, totally. It's not just a background. It's like a character in itself.
Yeah.
And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I think so too. So let's move from the kind of tumultuous coast and talk about the estuary.
Okay.
The zone where, the river meets the sea.
Yeah.
What do you think about that setting?
Well, the estuary is such a great symbol. It's this place of transition where you have the fresh water and the salt water mixing and teeming with life despite, the constantly shifting tides and the muddy banks.
Yeah, it's not exactly a relaxing beach, is it?
No, definitely not. And I think that's the point. The estuary reflects that kind of messy reality of relationships. All the mixing of different personalities, the push and pull between individual needs and shared experiences.
Right.
And the fear of, getting lost in it all.
Yeah, and I love that image of the mud sucking at Laura's feet,
Oh, yeah.
as she tries to navigate the estuary. It's like such a visceral representation of that fear of being overwhelmed by negative emotions, like literally losing yourself
Totally.
in the complexities of a relationship.
Absolutely. And it's against this backdrop that we really see her internal conflict come to life. She wants to break free from her mother's legacy, but how can she nurture the sea sprite without being controlling?
These are such profound questions.
Yeah.
The estuary provides such a perfect setting to explore them. I mean, we've seen the coastline reflect her emotions, the rocky coast trigger her trauma, and now the estuary is embodying all these uncertainties of relationships.
Yeah, it's like Hunter is intentionally using each ocean environment to mirror a different part of the human experience.
So as we move on to the mangroves,
Okay.
I'm super curious to see how this continues, because those tangled roots and unique creatures, it's a beautiful world, but a little unsettling at the same time.
It is.